Good morning, guys. Good morning, everyone. Good morning to everyone in the chat this morning. This is Trev from Trev Essence, and this morning we are going to be doing what we do over here every morning. We are going to be continuing with the reading of the book of Esther. And actually, this morning is the end of the reading of the book of Esther, because Esther is a very short book. It has just about 10 chapters. And yesterday we read up to chapter 8. So this morning we are going to finish the book of Esther, and then tomorrow we will start the book of Job. And that's where we are going to find another interesting story. But for right now, we are on the book of Esther. And for those of you who have not been following with the Bible reading, so you are not sure what you have run into this morning, well, let me explain to you. The book of Esther, what we have read so far is that Esther has replaced Vashti in the kingdom of Ahasuerus. Now, Ahasuerus was the king in the region spanning from India all the way over into Ethiopia back then. And his reign encompassed all of that region. And after he had called his governors and princes and his noblemen around the region to come into his palace in Shushan, so that he can show off all the marvel of his kingdom, how beautiful his kingdom was, all the provinces over which he ruled. Imagine it being that big that it took him 180 days to show off all of the provinces over which he ruled. And then comes the celebration, the culminating activity, the party. And at that party, he's serving his guests out of golden vessels, and it's just a grand occasion. And then comes the time when he wants to show off the queen. At the time, it was Queen Vashti. Beautiful woman. And he wants to show her off to his guests as well. And he sends to call her. Come, Vashti, come on. The king has summoned you. And Vashti refuses to go. And the king becomes quite angry. It's like, what in the world? Nobody, including a woman, nobody has ever defied the king. How dare her to defy me? And then he has this aide who's very close to him. He's an advisor named Memucan. And the Memucan says to the king, you know what? Vashti is really out of order. Vashti has passed her place. She should not do that. Because when she does that, she's not just defying you, but more importantly, she is teaching the other women around that it is okay to defy a man. And can you imagine all these women around here starting to defy their husbands? Starting to defy the men around here? We are going to have chaos in the society. We cannot have that. And so, this is what we're going to do. You're going to write a law that says women will be punished if they ever defy the orders of their husbands. And moreover, it's time to replace Vashti. She's not worthy of such a noble position. You need to find someone who is more deserving of that position, because she's not. And so they started to search for someone to replace Vashti. But Vashti don't care. Vashti was busy having her own little celebration for the women around. Because remember, the king didn't invite the women to this grand celebration he was having. No, he invited princes and noblemen and wise men and men. So Vashti was entertaining the women. So after Vashti was rebuked for not having come when the king called her, they started the campaign to find somebody to replace her. And eventually, they settled with Esther. And the king loved Esther. Esther replaced Vashti. Now, Esther. Who was Esther? Esther was born in Nebuchadnezzar's Babylon, where he had taken all the Jews as slaves down there in Babylon. Her parents had died when she was very young, and so her Mordecai, who was her cousin, had raised her as his own child. And so she was very close to him. She had practiced his ways because Mordecai was a real sort of like Orthodox Jew. And Mordecai practiced his religion in his home, because there were laws that they couldn't practice publicly. But he continued to practice in his home. And so Esther grew up practicing Judaism. So now that they were free, they were no longer in Babylon under Nebuchadnezzar. They had scattered all over the place. Now, remember, at this point, there wasn't any rule over there in Jerusalem. Jerusalem had been dismantled. There wasn't anybody. The power, I should say, the power was stripped from Judah. And so the Jews were scattered all over the region. And here was Esther and Mordecai and other Jews under the reign of this king, Ahasuerus. And so after Esther became queen, now Mordecai is sitting at the gate of the palace, and he hears these two men conspiring against the king. And he sends word to Esther to say, listen, these two men are plotting evil against King Ahasuerus. And Esther told the king that Mordecai had told her she had gotten word from word through Mordecai that these two men were plotting against the king. And so the king ordered these two men to be executed. Now, after that execution, Mordecai continues to do as he does, he sits outside the gate every day. But then here comes Haman. Haman is a very powerful person. He is liked by the king, and he really feels very noble of himself. He thinks very noble of himself. He thinks that the people around need to bow to him because he is close to the king and he's very powerful. And so whenever he's walking around, whenever anybody sees him, they bow to him. They treat him like real royalty. But Mordecai refuses to bow to Haman. And every time he would pass by the gate, everybody else would bow, but certainly not Mordecai. Because Mordecai says, I do not bow to any ordinary man. Haman didn't like that. And so he used his proximity to the king to have the king write a law that anyone who does not bow to him deserves to be hung. And after the king had written it and he had given his ring to Haman to seal the deal, Haman sent this out to all the other governors around the region so that everybody will adhere to this new rule that anybody who refuses to bow to him or to any other noble statesman would be hung. You know, the Jews would practice not to bow to anybody but their God. And so this was a direct target on the Jews. So Haman had a gallows built because he knew that when he passed again, Mordecai was not going to bow to him. And he would have that gallows ready to execute Mordecai. Mordecai still refused to bow to him. He went in to the king to have his sessions with the king. But Mordecai, having heard what was going on, had communicated with Esther to say, this is what is going on. Can't you use your influence, your position as close as you are to King Ahasuerus to have him create a new law for us Jews? And lo and behold, Esther spoke with Ahasuerus the king and relayed Mordecai's concern. And Esther reminded the king that Mordecai was the person who had told her about the two men who wanted to execute him. And she says, he has done so much to save you. What can you do for him? And so the king sent to call Mordecai. And when Mordecai came, he gave Mordecai new robes. He gave Mordecai his own horse to ride on. He really treated Mordecai with a lot of respect. And Haman didn't like that. And when Mordecai came in and Haman saw that it was Mordecai, the man who he had conspired to have executed, he was so angry. And when Mordecai told the king that the person who was planning all of this was Haman, Haman was angry because he thought he had such close proximity to the king that it would be his word against Mordecai's word. But the king now felt a lot of loyalty towards Mordecai because he remembered the kindness of Mordecai towards him in sparing his life from the two co-conspirators. Now, the king, realizing that Haman was a traitor of sorts, he ordered Haman to be hung. And so he took Haman's robe, he took the ring that he had given to Haman, and he gave them to Mordecai. And he ordered his men to hang Haman. And so Haman was executed. And now the king gave Mordecai and Esther permission to write the new law as they see fit in benefit of the Jews. And so Mordecai and Esther set out to write the new laws that would preserve Judaism and benefit the Jews in the region. Isn't that some kind of a story? Yes, when you're digging pit, dig two. The enemy's plot turned right around on them. He dug a pit in which Haman dug a pit in which he himself fell. And so today we are going to continue with the reading of Esther. It has only 2 chapters left, but I am sure that those 2 chapters will have a great culmination for the life of Esther. For the life of Esther in the palace of Cyrus. So we are going to be reading Esther chapters 9 and 10. So come along with us. Get your book Bible or your Google Bible, whichever one, and let us read together. Now, before I go any further, let me say this. We do not endorse any particular religion or any particular denomination here. What we do is we are trying to read the Bible on our own so that we can understand it for ourselves. Because after all, the Bible is very influential. The Bible is very influential in our lives, and it takes precedence over every other book in our lives. And so it is important that we know what is in the Bible rather than being told. And for those of you who have been with me since we started reading the book of Genesis, you will agree that we have come across quite a bit of controversy in the Bible. But we continue to read it nonetheless. And so here we are reading from the book of Esther this morning. Esther chapter 9. Now in the 12th month, that is the month Adar, on the 13th day. Hold on. The Bible has typos in it. Let us continue. Let us start again. Esther chapter 9. Now in the 12th month, that is the month Adar, on the 13th day of the month, when the king's commandment and his decree drew near to be put in experience, in the day that the enemies of the Jews hoped to have power over them, though it was turned to the contrary, that the Jews had rule over them that hated them. The Jews gathered themselves together in their cities throughout all the provinces of King Ahasuerus to lay hand on such as sought their hurt, and no man could withstand them for the fear of them fell upon all people. So the fear of the Jews fell upon all people. You hear that? Man a plan and God a wipe out. So all of them were planning that on this day they were going to start enacting their hate towards the Jews. But thanks to Mordecai and Esther, there was a new law that meant the Jews were going to be the ones in charge. Verse 3. And all the rulers of the provinces, and the lieutenants, and the deputies, and officers of the king helped the Jews, because the fear of Mordecai fell upon them. For Mordecai was great in the king's house, and his fame went out throughout all the provinces. For this man Mordecai waxed greater and greater. So here Mordecai now became very powerful in the king's house. He was calling the shots. He was making the rules. And everybody was now afraid of what Mordecai might do, because, the Jews were considered to be underdogs at this point. Now here is Mordecai, and he is a Jew, and he is for his people, and the rules and the laws that he is helping to enact are in favor of the Jews, and the people didn't like that. Thus the Jews smote all their enemies with the stroke of the sword, and slaughter and destruction, and did what they would unto those that hated them. And in Shushan, the palace, the Jews slew and destroyed 500 men. That was in Shushan alone. That's in the palace alone. And Parshandatha, and Dalphon, and Aspatha, and Poratha, and Adala, and Aridatha, and Parmashta, and Arasai, and Aridai, and Vajezatha, the 10 sons of Ammon, the son of Ammedatha, the enemy of the Jews, slew they, but on the spoil laid they not their hand. So here the Jews slew 500 people, and they made sure to slay Haman's sons. Remember, Haman was the man who had built the gallows for Mordecai, and he was the one who had the king to pass that law against the Jews. And so they also slew his sons, so that the sons wouldn't be there to take revenge for the death of their father. And there was so much animosity that after they slew them, they did not even take any of their riches. They just wanted them out of the way. Wow. Verse 11. On that day, the number of those that were slain in Shushan the palace were brought before the king. And the king said unto Esther the queen, the Jews have slain and destroyed 500 men in Shushan the palace, and the 10 sons of Ammon. What have they done in the rest of the king's provinces? Now, what is thy portion? What is thy petition? And it shall be granted thee. Or what is thy request further? And it shall be granted. So here the king is saying, I cannot imagine if you all have slain 500 people just in the palace alone. I can only imagine what has gone on outside the gates of the palace. Now tell me, Esther, what else you want me to do for you? What else you have planned? Tell me, make your request so I can help you to carry it out. Then said Esther, if it please the king, let it be granted to the Jews which are in Shushan to do tomorrow also according unto this day's decree, and let Haman's 10 sons be hanged upon the gallows. I thought they were dead already. And the king commanded it so to be, and the decree was given at Shushan, and they hanged Haman's 10 sons. Oh, so they didn't slay them by the sword as it said earlier. Okay. Because in verse 10 it says, the 10 sons of Haman, the son of Ammedatha, the enemy of the Jews, they slew. Okay. So here in verse 13 it says, they hung them on the gallows. And the king commanded it, so it was done. And the decree was given at Shushan, and they hanged Haman's 10 sons. For the Jews that were in Shushan gathered themselves together on the 14th day also of the month of Adar. So this was the next day, because the slaughter took place on the 13th. So here on the 14th, that's the next day, and slew 300 men at Shushan. But on the prey they laid not their hand. Verse 16. But the other Jews that were in the king's provinces gathered themselves together and stood for their lives, and had rest from their enemies, and slew of their foes 75,000, but they laid not their hands on the prey. On the 13th day of the month Adar, and on the 14th day, of the same rested they, and made it a day of feasting and gladness. But the Jews that were at Shushan assembled together on the 13th day thereof, and on the 14th day thereof, and on the 15th day of the same they rested, and made it a day of feasting and gladness. Wow. So on the 13th day, they did the slaughters. On the 14th day, they continued the slaughter. And on the 15th day of the month of Adar, they celebrated. The Jews celebrated the destruction of their enemies. Therefore, the Jews of the villages that dwelt in the unwalled towns made the 14th day of the month Adar a day of gladness and feasting, and a good day, and of sending portions one to another. So that's the day when they mean sending portion, means they share meals one to another. So it's a day of great celebration. And Mordecai wrote these things and sent letters unto all the Jews that were in all the provinces of the king Ahasuerus, both near and far, to establish this among them, that they should keep the 14th day of the month Adar and the 15th day of the month Adar yearly. So Mordecai sent out to all the provinces that the 14th and the 15th day of Adar should be a Jewish celebration day, and they all should observe those 2 days as a celebration, as the days wherein the Jews rested from their enemies, and the month which was turned unto them from sorrow to joy, and from mourning into a good day, that they should make them days of feasting and joy, and of sending portions one to another, and gifts to the poor. And the Jews undertook to do as they had begun, and as Mordecai had written unto them, because Haman, the son of Ammedatha, the Agathite, the enemy of all the Jews, had devised against the Jews to destroy them, and had cast pur, that is, the lot, to consume them and to destroy them. But when Esther came before the king, he commanded by letters that his wicked device, which he devised against the Jews, should return upon his own head, and that he and his sons should be hanged on the gallows. Wherefore they called these days Purim, after the name of Pur. Therefore, oh wow. Therefore, for all the words of this letter, and of that which they had seen concerning this matter, and which had come unto them, the Jews ordained and took upon them, and upon their seed, and upon all such as joined themselves unto them, so as it should not fall, that they would keep these 2 days according to their writing, and according to their appointed time every year. And that these days should be remembered and kept throughout every generation, every family, every province, and every city, and that these days of Purim should not fall from among the Jews, nor the memorial of them perish from their seed. And so you see, guys, the celebration of Purim among the Jews, it exists even until today. And here it says, what is Purim? According to Google, not all Jewish holidays are about unbridled celebration. For instance, Yom Kippur is instead a time for fasting along with solemn prayer, reflection, and atonement. But the springtime holiday of Purim is indeed a time for all-out fun and festivity, making it one of the most joyful holidays on the calendar for celebrants of all ages. In fact, the lively observation surrounding the holiday can feel like one big party or festival, with a crowded calendar of carnivals, songs and dance, and events packed with food and drink. And that's before we have even gotten to the Purim customs. Let's see what the Purim customs are. Okay, so the Purim customs include carnivals, parades, singing, dancing, and loads of tasty treats. But that is the celebration that had started from the time of Esther and Mordecai, and it's a celebration that continues amongst the Jews even until today. They continue with the celebration of Purim. So if ever you wanted to know where did the celebration of Purim originate, where did it originate from, you will remember that it originated from the time of Esther and Mordecai. And until today, the Jews continue to have their celebration of Purim. Let us continue. Verse 29. Then Esther the queen, the daughter of Abihail, and Mordecai the Jew, wrote with all authority to confirm the second letter of Purim, And he sent the letter unto all the Jews, to the 127 provinces of the kingdom of Ahasuerus, with words of peace and truth, to confirm these days of Purim in their times appointed, according as Mordecai the Jew and Esther the queen had enjoyed them, and as they had decreed for themselves and for their seed the matters of the fastings and their cry. Verse 32, and this is the last verse of chapter 9 of the book of Esther. And the decree of Esther confirmed these matters of Purim, and it was written in the book. Here is the reading of chapter 9 of the book of Esther. And here we see Esther and Mordecai has sort of become the steadfast rulers there in the palace of Shushan. And Mordecai has gone from being the underdog to the ruler, and ain't that something? From rags to riches, huh? From being ruled to being the ruler. Now let us move on to chapter 10 of the book of Esther. Now chapter 10 is very short. Chapter 10 has just like 3 verses. So we're going to get through this pretty quickly. Chapter 10. And the king Ahasuerus laid a tribute upon the land and upon the isles of the sea, and all the acts of his power and of his might, and the declaration of the greatness of Mordecai, whereunto the king advanced him. Are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Media and Persia? Well, we read the book of the Chronicles, but I never remember reading anything about Mordecai. Did you all remember? I don't remember reading anything about Mordecai in the book of the Chronicles. So this tells me that there are some missing portions of the book of the Chronicles. There has to be some missing portions, because I didn't see anything in the book of the Chronicles about Mordecai. I don't remember this story being told in the Chronicles. But anyway, in the book of Esther, it says that it's written in the Chronicles. Let us continue. And this is the last verse of chapter 10 in the book of Esther. For Mordecai the Jew was next unto King Ahasuerus, and king and great among the Jews, and accepted of the multitude of his brethren, seeking the wealth of his people, and speaking peace to all his seed. And one thing I have noticed, guys, that with all this reading right here, and all of this story of Esther and Mordecai, there isn't much mention of the Jewish God. I don't remember there being any. I don't remember reading anything pertaining to the Jewish God in this whole book. This whole book only spoke about the earthly king, Ahasuerus. I hope I'm not wrong. I really do hope I'm not wrong. But I've read this book and I've taken notes, and I don't remember anything in here mentioning the God of the Jews. So this is basically just a story of what happened during those times between Mordecai, Esther, Aman, and King Ahasuerus. Now, this is where our reading is going to end for today. I want to say thanks to everybody who came into the live, and those who are going to be listening after the live has ended. I want to say thanks to you all. I sincerely appreciate all your support and all your love. Those of you who have shared out the lives, those of you who have commented, those of you who have liked it, those of you who have watched it, and even the silent listeners, the ones who never comment, the ones who never say a word. You don't know they're there, but they're sort of lurking in the dark. I want to say thanks to you as well for coming in. I'm sure there has to be something. There has to be something that has caused you to come in and to continue to come in. And whatever it is, I hope it serves you well. I thank you so much for coming either way. All right, guys. And that is going to be it from me for this morning, my friends. I hope you all enjoy the reading as much as I enjoyed bringing it to you. When we come back tomorrow, we will move on to the book of Job. And Job is another rather interesting book of the Bible. So we will move on to the book of Job tomorrow. And until then, my friends, I want to say this is Trev from Trevessence. This is Trev from Trevessence, where your journey matters. Now go ahead, guys, and have yourselves a great day, everybody.